compelling stories are not hard to find. You just need to know where to look. Join your host, Dr. Eric Shaw, prosecutor Ryan Frank, writer Adrian Bonenberger, and comedian Ryan Connor as they interview ordinary people about their extraordinary experiences. This is Baggage.
Hi, and welcome to Baggage. On this episode, we have Marian the librarian. She is a 24-year career librarian. She has spent the last 13 years working for a government library and will soon be working for a federal library. I know this isn't our typical type of guest here, but in the current political climate and with everything that's going on, we thought this would be kind of an interesting aside to have her on. So, Marian, welcome to the show. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Eric. Thanks so much for having me. Like you said, I've been a librarian for over 24 years. I was a clerk, so that's the person that welcomes you in the library at the front desk. I used to help people check books in and out and help get their library cards and pay their fines and things like that. And I loved working in libraries so much that I just stayed. I became a teen librarian after that. After that, I was a children's librarian, and from there, I ended up working for a state government where I trained librarians all over the state to be the best librarians they can be. And after that, my next career move is I'm going to go along and work for a federal library. And I will just mention that we are using a pseudonym today for me, just because the current political climate is a little crazy. So that's a little bit about me. My name is not really Marian the librarian, but I appreciate you letting me use it today.
Okay, let me chime in for a second. So a little breaking down the fourth wall here. I have been telling the guys, the other hosts, that I would love for a librarian to come on. And I've been trying for probably over a year. And it is like trying to uncover an undercover agent, like that's trying to infiltrate the mob or something. No, everyone's like, oh, I got lots to say, but no one wants to speak publicly, which blew my mind.
Isn't that wild?
Which is just crazy. Now, because what I'm thinking is, I think a lot of people would be surprised by crazy librarian stories. Like, you think being a librarian is kind of mundane, but probably some really unusual things come up that you're not really trained or prepared for, just like you're expected to deal with it. There's that aspect of it. But then there's also, what's the organization's name?
There's a few. There's Purple Parents. There's Moms for Liberty. Is that the one you're thinking of?
Yes, that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. Moms for Liberty. Yeah. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, it's all right. We're under attack. That's why people don't want to talk to you.
I want to just put this out there because, after Kyle, the immigration lawyers episode, we had kind of a little bit of pushback there. And I want to just emphasize that we are not a political show. We don't represent any sort of side of the political spectrum, but we do find the people stuck in the middle of it to be interesting. And so I think even though there are definitely things from both sides, but we are not an innately political show and we're not emphasizing one side or the other, but we do want Marian to be able to share her stories in a free way and talk about her experiences, even though they are now that we are now dipping our toes into the political waters of this.
That, you know what? That's well said. I like that. Some people are caught in the middle. We try to be apolitical. Some things that aren't political are like book burning. It's not really a political thing. So that's kind of a one-sided issue for me. But anyway, just my bias.
Book burning and book banning and honestly, most library funding in the United States comes from a political entity. So it's really difficult to have an apolitical story about libraries simply because they're a government agency in most cases. There are a few public libraries around the nation that are privately funded, but for the most part, they're all funded through the government. So it is difficult to talk about these things without, being political, I guess.
Can we start there? Because that was one of the bullet points that we had talked about was general funding. And you've been doing this now for 2 decades. So you've kind of seen multiple administrations. You've seen kind of the ups and downs. And can you just talk to us about the way funding has gone for the library system and then kind of where we are right now and the stresses that's kind of put on you personally?
Sure. So libraries are funded in different ways throughout the nation. I only really know about 2 states. the state that that I worked in most recently, most of the libraries are funded through property tax dollars. And there is this general push right now to really lower people's taxes. But when you lower taxes, you're really also limiting the services that can be provided with those taxes, including things like libraries and firefighters and police and, all the other things that are funded through government dollars. But then, for example, in other states, funding is through maybe like a legislative law that's passed or a levy or something like that. So most of the time, though, funding comes through the goodwill of the government. The local government decides that libraries are valuable and they want to be able to have them. And so they incur some kind of a tax on their citizenry that they're usually happy to pay so that they can get those services. Or actually, that's not even true. Very oftentimes, they're not happy to pay it, even though it's usually very much like a percentage of pennies on the dollar in order to fund these services. And it just depends on, I don't know, in the state that I was working in, if it's property tax dollars in wealthier communities, you're going to have better libraries because they're going to have more dollars to play with. But if it's a rural community where they just don't have that many property owners, you're not going to have as much funding for libraries. Aside from that local funding, then there are other entities in every state that provide additional either services or straight up funding for libraries. And a lot of that comes through the federal agency called IMLS, which is the Institute for Museum and Library Services. The funding for that federal agency was basically zeroed out this year. And so libraries are really in a tricky spot right now because our federal funding is really, everyone's questioning whether or not it's going to continue to be available. And then, I don't know, in the state that I was working at, we had state funding as well, and that got essentially whacked in half so that we had even less to work with. And then, of course, with this push right now to lower taxes, that means, I don't know, funding for libraries is really, it's been on the chopping block a little bit recently, but I mean, like in the sort of lengthier past, but recently it's really taken a hit this year and mostly this year, I would say. And it's hard because then you're stressed and you're worried that your job is going to go away. And in some cases, that's what happens. I have colleagues that were riffed because of cuts in funding and their jobs are literally gone.
Didn't the head of the Library of Congress get fired?
Yes, Dr. Carla Hayden. She was removed. Luckily, the Library of Congress has a very good general counsel, and they managed to put as her replacement, I think, the deputy librarian. So the Library of Congress is still being led by someone that has the Library of Congress's best interest at heart, is what I would say. But I know that that's a temporary situation and that could change. So
that's what got me interested in having a librarian as a guest, because of her firing. It came as a surprise to a lot of people because on paper,
she's fantastic. She's so great.
It's sometimes political appointee kind of situation, but she's an actual librarian, was incredible.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'll also say that, like,
you're the guest, please go ahead.
It's not always like, I guess what I'll say is people that are in administration, if you're an administrator in a library, you don't necessarily have to be a librarian. I'm not like a purist that says that every person in a library needs to be an MLS librarian, someone who has a master in library science. And very oftentimes those very top leaders don't necessarily have their masters because they've gone to business school and they know how to make these partnerships, or they have some other administration, certification or whatever. And sometimes that's what libraries need. They need somebody that can look at the big picture and make strategic thoughts and plans versus being a librarian that knows, how to catalog and I don't know, how to think about resources in that way. However, it is kind of awesome that she was a librarian and still is a librarian and did such an amazing job. And I think, I don't know a whole lot about her career, but she was just fantastic. Everybody loved her. And she was so passionate about what she did. And that was really clear.
You kind of alluded to this here, but one of the other kind of bullet points that we want to talk about, you were talking about funding, and then you kind of led into that a lot of the librarians have business degrees, and I want to talk more about just like general management of the libraries and what does that look like, and what has been your experience navigating that.
So I belong to a private group on Facebook, but it's giant, and it's called the ALA Think Tank, and that's the American Library Association think tank. And anybody that works in a library can join that group, and it's really huge. And the number of stories in that think tank, in that group about poor management just boggles the mind. I have worked in, let me count really quick, 1, 2, I guess I've only really worked in 3 libraries. And during that time, I've had one great manager. But I've had how many jobs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've had 6 jobs in libraries and one good manager. And I think that's probably par for the course. Because people that go into libraries are going into libraries because they love serving people, right? They love libraries. They don't go into libraries because they really want to necessarily be a manager. And I think somebody that loves books and reading and literacy and connecting people with resources, that's not the same kind of person as someone who can inspire a team to be the best team that they can be. It's not necessarily somebody who's going to be strategic in their thinking. So I've had mostly pretty bad managers. I had one manager who hired her son to be the head of a department. And then he was an okay worker for a while. And then he just kind of stopped coming. He stopped working 8-hour days. He was getting paid to work 8-hour days, but he was working maybe like 4-hour days. And since he was the son of the director, that was allowed to happen for a very long time. So that's just one example. You know, there's a lot of examples. If you look on the ALA think tank, there's a lot of belly aching about really poor management. Now, that said, there are other people that do a great job. I think it just sort of depends on what you get.
What are some of the kind of unexpected things that a librarian has had to deal with? Maybe specific examples of you've had to deal with, like that is not what I thought was going to happen at a library today.
Like people pooping on the floor?
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, people pooping
you don't
on the
expect
floor.
that in any job.
Yeah, I was listening
Actually, my job, it does happen.
I was listening to your episode about the school teacher, and you guys talked a lot about kids pooping their pants. And I was like, ooh, they're excited because they're going to be excited because I'm going to talk about poop again. So yeah, a lot of medical emergencies happen in public libraries where you're serving, in many cases, especially in cities, they're serving a unstable, unhoused population. And so there's a lot of kind of first responder kind of stuff that happens. I've had multiple situations where someone comes in the library and they're clearly high. They don't know what they're saying to you. They're spinning around in a circle. Sometimes people are holding it together a little bit. And so then you're trying to see, like, why are you at the library today? Is there something we can help you with? And very often they can't articulate it. It's never happened to me to have someone like overdose in the bathrooms, but that does happen in public libraries kind of frequently. I don't know. I had a man once who was a transient person. He wasn't from our community, and he showed up right at closing time on the coldest night of the year. It was like 30 below or something. It was really, really cold. And he proceeded to tell me that he was unhoused and that I needed to find a hotel room for him for the night. And we were a small town. I think we had one hotel, and I didn't have funding to pay for a hotel room for him. And I really didn't know what to do. It was like 8 o'clock on a Thursday night, and all of our social services were closed. You know, there was really no one to call. And he got very upset with me and was kind of yelling at me like, this is your job to help me. And I was like, look, you're in a really small town. I don't know what to do for you. And I ended up having to he left, and I ended up calling the local police because that was really the only thing I knew what to do. And they walked me to my car, and I have no idea what happened to that man. But I called some churches And I did end up speaking to someone at a church, and they were like, we don't do that. Like, we don't have a mission here. Our town is too small, like, I don't know what to do for this person. And I don't even know how he got to our town, but he was on his way from someplace to someplace else. And that was pretty hard because I just didn't know what to do for him. But there's all kinds of situations like that. Kids that are at the library until we close, and then they're like, my mom is going to be here in 5 minutes. And so you wait, and 20 minutes later, the mom is not there. And the kid is 11 or whatever. And it's like, well, then you end up having to call the police again, and something happens, lots of situations like that.
That's crazy. It doesn't happen so much anymore because the internet's a little bit more accessible to people with phones and things like that. But I remember when I first started prosecuting, you would still get a couple of people at the library doing internet crimes, using the computers for internet crimes. So have you run into that?
I haven't run into that personally, but I definitely know, library staff are trained so that if someone like you comes into the library and is like, I need all of this data on this person, we're really trained to protect privacy over almost everything else. Mm-hmm. If somebody like you came in and was like, I need all this information, I would be like, well, first I have to call our lawyer. Mm-hmm. And we would lawyer up right away and be like, I need our general counsel in here to just help me understand what I can give to you and what I don't have to give to you. Because one of the things that's so wonderful about libraries, I think, is that, you can go into a library and your internet browsing is supposed to be, it's not necessarily private. It's actually not private because you're on this public network and you're using public whatever. And you can't be on porn or all those kinds of things. But definitely the kinds of things that you check out from the library, if you're checking out books, we're really trained not to provide people with like a history of what someone checks out.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. Like law enforcement trying to get a history of what people have checked out. I hadn't thought about that. I was thinking about back in the day, some of this even predates me, of like, librarian calling or somebody, just a citizen at the library, like, yeah, this guy's on the computer looking at clearly child porn and like printing it on our printer. Ooh. So can you send somebody over? Like that's.
Yeah, I've never run into that. But yes, in those situations, absolutely. You would want, if the library is reporting it, obviously we would want someone to respond to. I guess something else that happens a lot, which maybe it actually happens a lot. We get a lot of people, they call libraries with pranks, like crank callers. It happens all the time.
Any good ones?
I had a guy that called and wanted to know what I was wearing, like all of this nasty, not great, kind of gross stuff.
Some sort of librarian fetish?
Yeah.
You want you to like put the glasses on?
I think so. Yeah. And like, that's never great. And I forget what the one, there's a guy, I don't know. There's a guy on the ALA think tank, and he's got some bit that he does with public libraries. And then there's also someone who wants to do every summer reading program across the whole nation when our summer reading programs are really only for our communities. So I don't know what the draw is for that. But people calling and like wanting to talk dirty to you, it's just never great.
Oh, that's not funny. That's creepy. I shouldn't be laughing.
It is creepy. It's not
super
good.
Creepy.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law has a good response for this. I don't know if it works for creeps, but when somebody spam calls, he just starts reading the Bible. He'll just have a Bible by the phone, just starts reading it until they hang up. I don't know if that works for the creeper. That might turn him on. I don't know.
Right. Who knows? The strategy that I've heard many librarians use is just, and what was your question? What was your reference? Do you have a reference question? And if they say like, what are you wearing? You can be like, well, today I have on 100% cotton, denim. You can find this in this catalog. Is there anything else I can help you with reference wise? You want to stop it, but it's hard to know.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's the most surprising thing you've said. The whole asking the creepy calls. I would have never expected that. I expected the homeless people. I expected the pressures of like politics. I did not expect creeper fetish people calling.
Yeah, and that still happens all the time. It's kind of weird and awful,
I imagine it is overwhelmingly women in the library services. Is that so right?
Particularly in the lower ranks. Our industry is kind of known for women working in it, but we still, like many fields, if you are upper, like a top level, you might be a male. Yeah, which is kind of a thing, I guess. What's you guys' relationship with libraries? I want to know. Like, do you guys go to your public library? Did you use an academic library when you were going through school?
Oh, I don't think the tables are turned. I don't think we've been asked questions before.
I just want to know. That was one of the things I was real interested in knowing, like, what's your background with libraries?
We have an amazing public library here near where I live that my kids go to. We try to do it every weekend and take a big bag. I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old in a big bag, and we fill it up with whatever books they want. And
that's fantastic.
We read to them overnight, and it's great. It's very clean, well maintained. I think the county they fund it. It seems like they fund it very well, and
that's
a great staff. So we're really fortunate. Yeah,
good.
I have a funny library story. When I was doing my master's, my advisor told me to like go find articles on what we were doing there, and so this was early 2000s. So the internet was maturing, but we didn't have all the particularly scientific literature and the giant like data banks that we do right now, and it wasn't nearly as accessible. And so I printed off all these bibliographies. I had all this info, and I bring it to him like all proud of myself, and he's like, "The fuck is this?" And I'm like, "This is the articles." He's like, "No, you need to go to the library. You need to find these articles, print them, and then read them all." And I was just
like, you had a list of articles,
hundreds of pages of scientific articles there. And he was like, this is not what I asked you to do. And I was just like, oh no. So I spent a lot of time in a academic library during my master's and to some degree in med school as well.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found that since the rise of the internet, are people utilizing libraries less or differently because so much more information is accessible from home or just different? Like you couldn't back in the day, if you needed info, you pull an encyclopedia.
Right.
And that just doesn't exist anymore. Now we have Wikipedia. So like, how has that changed things?
I would say that by and large, Americans are using libraries more today than they really ever have. And I think that's because of economics. People don't have money. And so they're coming to the library to get a really good deal, which is that you can get all of these great resources for free. And I think libraries have done an amazing job kind of changing and growing and changing with technology. They're offering different services now. Obviously, we've had story time forever. Ryan, you mentioned that you go to your public library with your little kids. Do they do library programs as well at the public library?
Yeah, one of my favorites. We haven't done it yet. We've been there when it happened, but my son hasn't done it yet. We should do this, where reading age kids can read to dogs.
Of course, yes.
That's a great program because
yes.
they get really nervous reading to mom and dad out loud.
Right.
But they're comfortable reading to a dog. It's really cool.
Yeah, we call that pause to read. PAWS.
Got it. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, pause to read. That's just one name for it. I'm sure it has different names in other communities. But so they're offering all kinds of programs, first of all. They're also offering way more than books. It's really a cliche in libraries to be like, libraries are more than books, but they honestly are. You can borrow a hotspot from a library. You can borrow a guitar from a library, depending on what kind of library it is. This library of
like
things.
Cooking equipment and stuff like that.
Cooking equipment. What is that called? Heavy duty tools. What am I trying to say?
Power tools?
Yeah,
power tools. Thank you. Yeah, power tools, things like that. Recording equipment, all kinds of this microphone that you guys sent me. You could probably check that out at a library, depending on what kind of library it is. But as far as like the internet goes, I will say the government library that I just came from was primarily a research library. And we have, over the past 10, 15 years, the number of questions that we've had has significantly dropped. So we're not getting as many reference questions because, like you say, people can find general information pretty handily on the internet. However, the questions that we have been getting are harder to answer. They take a lot longer to answer. You have to dive way deep into all kinds of resources that usually are not available online. People that want to do like the history of their house or I don't know, they're looking for genealogy type things. I think people are just digging into more complex questions now. And that's one of the places that libraries can really shine, is to help people find those difficult to answer questions. The other thing about libraries and librarians is that our job has always been to connect people to information. And just because a fact is available on the internet doesn't mean that someone's going to be able to find it. Librarians are trained to be able to sift through all the noise and find the actual answer to someone's, persistent question. So that's never changed. Librarians have always been here to try to connect people to the right information.
I mean, it seems like as much as anything else, AI and particularly the internet that we're in now, which is late 2025, has it's less given people easy access to information, and more it gives people the illusion, or perhaps the delusion, that they have easy access to information. Because my feeling is that 5 or 6 years ago, it was actually something happened. Google changed something with the search engine. You could like in the first 3 pages of Google, like you would be able to see something that would be like, okay, that's actually what I'm looking for. And now it's all like sponsored stuff and just like the same links to like the same types of things over and over again. And you're like, I don't use Google anymore for that reason. I don't.
Well, and a lot of the hits are, they want you to buy something, so if you ask a question, it's going to be like, well, you can buy this book and it'll give you the answer or whatever. Or you can buy this product that will help you not even need to ask this question any longer. But that brings up another point, which is that librarians have always been on the forefront of information literacy. So this is just like, how do you search for information? How do you use the Google search box? Do you know anything about Boolean logic? If you're going to do a phrase, do you put it in quotes so that it's together, so it's searching for that whole thing? Do you do I don't know all the other Boolean things, but there's lots of great other things where you're like saying, I want this phrase plus this word, or this phrase but not this word, to help you be a more savvy searcher. And to your point about AI, there's many librarians out there that are working hard to kind of understand AI better, to come up with policies for their libraries about AI. But I think the number one thing that we're all trying to do is to educate people as to what AI can do, what it doesn't do well, and how you can understand it, when is the right places to use it, when you shouldn't use it, things like that. I personally have a really hard time with AI just because I think that the ethics behind it are not very clear right now. It seems like there's a lot of energy, physical energy, being used to power these things so that we can all get better videos of cats. I don't know.
I should divulge a quick conflict of interest here, which is that I am part of the lawsuit I learned recently suing Anthropic, because one of the books that I worked on that got published through Simon & Schuster got hoovered up by Anthropic. So there might be a $1,500 payday for me and 20 other authors coming soon.
That would be nice for you. How do you feel about that? That your work that you used your blood, sweat, and tears on to generate is now kind of for free in this animal that's using it to make money for other people. How's that feel to you?
Joke's on them, because that story sucked. That was one of the worst stories I've ever written. And it was puerile and sophomoric, and it was badly written. So joke's on them.
Okay.
But all kidding aside, I mean, but from that perspective too, it's like garbage in, garbage out, and I understand the LLMs and generative AI. I understand basically how they work and how it's this predictive model. And it seemed like supposedly it's supposed to be getting better. But I've actually just in the last week or so, there have been some really interesting articles about how the business model is like, they've started to be a little bit more transparent about it. And they have people who are like these, premier or elite subscribers, $250 a month or something for like the total suite of tools that you can use, and they're burning like $20,000 to $30,000 per month of what they call inference power. So like they're paying $250, but it's costing Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever, Microsoft, $20,000 or $30,000 to generate all the stuff they're doing. So it's just like a really weird, I'm actually pretty skeptical that it's going to work out in the long run, but it has done a great job of tricking people into thinking that they can get any answer to any question magically. And of course, that's not what's really happening.
What do time-traveling mathematicians, ancient astronomers, and mad scientists have in common? Well, step into my laboratory at Math Science History, where time bends, ideas spark, equations echo, and the past hums with the electricity of what's to come. Hi, I'm Gabrielle Burchak, your mathematical host and curious conductor of Math Science History. Wind the clock, plug in the coils, and subscribe to Math Science History, where the past lights the way forward, one curious tale at a time.
No, and it's so crazy to me that you could take that money and invest it in your local community. And like, there's lots of studies that have gone on that have shown the economic benefit to having a great public library, because you've got, I mean, the people that come into your public, and we haven't even talked about the fact that there's many different kinds of libraries, right? I mean, you've got your public libraries, you've got your academic libraries. We've kind of talked about that. There are libraries in your jails that are doing a great service to help the incarcerated people try to better their lives. There's special libraries, there's law libraries, there's government libraries, there's all kinds of different school libraries. We haven't even talked about school libraries. There's all these different libraries that are available, and yet we're pulling funding from them where they can be economic generators in your town, because the people that are coming in to use your library are using them for vastly different reasons. You know, you've got people that are coming in just because they want a place to hang out and they don't want to spend $10 on a coffee, right? And so they want to just come in and sit and read a book or hang out with someone or whatever. And then you've got people, also like the digital divide in our country is real. Not everyone owns a smartphone. Not everyone has access to the internet in their home. And yet, in order to apply for a job, you have to have access to the internet by and large. So people come into the libraries and they're applying for jobs. They are also filing for unemployment, but they're starting businesses. You know, they're listening to podcasts. They're doing all kinds of things at the public library to generate dollars in their community, and that almost never gets talked about. I think the fact that libraries can be real big economic generators, whereas AI seems to be a real economic drain.
Well, so this is probably where the conversation could go back into politics. And rather than doing it in a political way and taking one side or another, what I'll do is say that you look at, Meta is working on an AI, Twitter X is working on an AI, Microsoft is working on an AI, Amazon is working on an AI. And they're all attempting to monopolize information. The Democrats would like to monopolize information, and the Republicans would like to monopolize information. Actually, maybe let's say maybe the Democrats don't actually want to monopolize information, but it is seen in some quarters as though they would like to monopolize information. The Republicans seem like they actually do to me. So the one resource online that is like under fire from all sides, and is seen, I think, as probably the best place to still get information is Wikipedia, which is actually like the best encyclopedia ever made. And it's like, it's wonderful. I give money. I give $10 a month, $120 a year to Wikipedia. And I guess it feels to me like maybe one of the reasons people have invested so much energy into destroying libraries or controlling them and undercutting their funding and sort of painting them out as the bad guy in certain situations is that it has, always been a nexus for people gathering and for solid information, verifiable information. And some people see that as very dangerous.
Yeah. And, the thing about libraries, they do have a price tag on them. Libraries aren't free. You have to support them usually with tax dollars or whatever. However, the beauty of public libraries is that they're built by their communities for the communities. And that's something that I always talk about when somebody comes in and wants to ban a book. The first question is like, well, where are you from? Are you from our community? There's a great graphic out right now that I think ALA has put it out, the American Library Association, and I don't really want to quote the percentages, but because I don't know off the top of my head, but there's a large percentage of book bans that happened in 2025 that did not come from individuals. They didn't come from concerned parents. They didn't come from concerned citizenry. They came from political organizations. And it's these organizations that are trying to take control of this local library. And the thing is that libraries are created by their community for their community. And they're very often 100% tailored for the kinds of questions and the kinds of demographics that they have in their community. And so whatever books they have in that building are really reflecting back to the community the things that the community is asking for. Like, we're going to have an interview with a vampire, and we're going to have this book by Sarah Vowell, and we're going to have a biography of John McCain. Like, we're going to have all these different kinds of things in our library based on what the community was asking for. And so if someone comes in and is saying, like, you shouldn't have these things in your library, well, who says? Why? What's your problem with people freely being able to read?
So that's one thing that got me really interested in doing an episode like this, is that organizations, that it's not individuals, it's organizations that have an agenda, will find people, usually not in your local community. They'll have to travel, and they'll show up to, like, whatever your local politic is, your body politic.
Usually it's a library board. Or even the board of supervisors for our local county is where some of these people show up. And Moms of Liberty, is that what it was? It was one of them that they have, like, Moms for Liberty?
Moms for Liberty, yes. Yeah. And they'll have, like, a script. The organization will have a script. And when you see these people show up to these board meetings or whatever, and they're it's like Parks and Rec. You're allowed to speak publicly and say whatever you want. You get your 2 minutes. Yeah. And they have the same script, and it is just a very, very small portion of the population, but not even the local population, that's pushing this agenda, and sometimes effective, depending on how much pushback there is.
And, librarians are scared because there are real examples of people getting arrested and people losing their jobs. I think it's more losing their jobs over book bans. Obviously, like, if it's your livelihood and you feel scared, maybe it's easier to not fight that fight, but it's such a slippery slope.
Have you run into books being banned at a library or libraries that you've worked at?
Personally, I have had really very few instances of that. Early on in my career, I did have a woman approach the desk, and she had an item in her hand, and she was like, "This cannot be in this library." And I did what I was supposed to do, which was follow the process. And I can tell you more about that if you want. And nothing came of that. But more recently, I haven't been the subject of that at all, simply because of the type of library that I was working in. But there are people, good friends of mine, that worked at a library that was in the national news because of the kind of book banning that was happening there. And book banning can look different. It's not always pulling the books out of the library and throwing them away. Sometimes what it is you're moving things out of the children's area into the adult area, or you're moving things, usually that's what it is, things out of the teen area and putting them in the adult area, or people are requesting some kind of a parent permission, like a parent has to be in the library with you to check out that book or whatever. And I think that yeah, parents should always be involved in what their kids are reading. And if a parent wants to be in charge of what a kid is reading, then go to the library with them. But if you're sending your kid to the library by themselves because you're utilizing free childcare at the public library, they're probably going to pull a book off the shelf, and they are also probably going to walk over to different areas of the library to do that.
Oh my God, parents should actually be responsible for the children? What?
I think so.
So a woman walks into your library, and she walks up to the desk with a copy of Catcher in the Rye and says, "This should not be in the library." What happens?
So first of all, we're always trained to listen. Like, okay, tell me more about why you feel that way. And then she might say something about the one sentence that she read or whatever. And the first thing that we're trained to do is to not get not be in an argument with them, to try to stay calm, to really let them know that their feedback is valued. Like, yeah, we want you to know that this was chosen for the library for a specific reason. It followed all of our standards, da, 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 da. Now that we're talking about it, I actually do remember a time that a dad came up to my desk with a copy of an anime title. So this is like, oh no, it was manga. That's Japanese comics. They were really big in the small town that I worked in. And this particular title actually did have some nudity in it. And it was in the teen area, but this father, his very small son, was really into Japanese comics. And the dad was like, look, we got to the scene and it's kind of like an orgy. Like this shouldn't have been something that my kid was going to look at. And I was like, so you guys are reading these together, right? And he was like, yeah, I'm reading it to my son because my son is too young and can't read yet. And I said, and you got it from the teen area? And he was like, I did. And I was like, so your son is like, did I already say how old the son was?
Just that he couldn't read. So I'm assuming it's like
yeah,
4
he was young.
or 4 or
He was
5.
maybe 6, I think. But he just loved comic books. And so the dad was reading all of this stuff. And I just kind of talked him through it. And I said, look, we do have comic books for kids in the kids section. And if you're in the kids section, you're going to find things that are more age appropriate for your kid. I'm not saying that this orgy scene is like great for necessarily for teens, but if you read the whole thing, like it's part of the whatever. And like I looked at the pictures, they were very stylistically done. It wasn't porn. We don't have porn in libraries. I don't know if we should talk about an orgy on this podcast, but anyway.
It's not the worst thing we've talked about.
Okay, good. But eventually, just through a conversation, I kind of helped him find other things that were more appropriate in the library. And we talked about, luckily at that moment, we were actually looking to kind of get some more space in the teen area anyway. And we were planning on moving all of the graphic novels kind of like around the corner into the quote unquote adult area. So literally like on a different side of a wall in essentially the same room. And I was like, I think we're going to move all that. Does that work? And he was like, yeah. And that was the end of it. However, had he wanted to pursue that challenge, you listen, you talk, you give them the reconsideration form. So every library is supposed to have a procedure to work with book banning. And the person that wants the book reconsidered fills out this big form. And the form is essentially like your contact information, the title, the author. And the big question is, how much of the book have you read? You know, and generally speaking, what do you think? Do you think they've read the book or not?
No, I do not think they've read the book.
They definitely usually have not read the whole book. So from there, the book remains on the shelf. That's the integral part. People feel like you need to pull it right away. No, our procedure, our policy is the book stays on the shelf while it goes through this process. So then what happens in many libraries is they buy multiple copies of it and they give it to their board. And the board has to read it in its entirety and decide if the book fulfills the initial criteria for buying it in the first place. And many libraries have, every library has a collection development policy, which says in our library, we're collecting things on purpose for our community that fit these needs. And every book that we have that we buy, depending on what your budget is, very often it has to have been reviewed in multiple professional journals and has to have a positive review and has to be in print and widely available sometimes, or has to reflect something specific about your community. So the thing is that when you ban a book, a lot of times, or you're challenging a book in a library, more copies of that book are going to be bought because they buy it and library dollars are used to buy those books. So then therefore, library programs are suffering because book dollars are being used to buy multiple copies so that everybody who needs to read it can read it. And it's generally like people on the board, maybe a teacher. There's generally like a panel of people that come in and review the book and they read the whole thing and they decide if it meets the criteria. And probably 99 times out of 100, it stays in the library.
Now, is that procedure going to be pretty much the same for most libraries, or is that specific to like your state or
I
your
would
county?
say that is best practice. So I think it's pretty common. It's very common to have a collection development policy. Like that's just the way we do things in libraries. It's very common to have a reconsideration policy, because we want people to be able, it's the library that belongs to them. It's their taxpayer dollars. And like that, when I had that conversation with that man, I realized that some of the graphic novels that we had were a little bit mature for the teen section. And so it made sense to move them into a different area of the library. And I was glad that I had that conversation with him. And it's okay to tweak your collection in those ways. But the issues come when somebody gives you a list of 500 titles. And then you say to them, there was a library in our community, in my broad community, a school library. And one of these groups came to them with this long list of titles, and they said, you need to remove these out of your library. And the woman said, I'm completely happy to work with you on this. We're going to follow our policy. So the first thing I want you to know is that we don't have 70 of these. Say it was a list of 100. She was like, you're telling us to remove these books? We don't even own them. Out of the 30 that we own, I'm going to look at those. Okay, I've applied our current collection development to those, and it turns out that 10 of these, if I look in our collection, they haven't been checked out lately, like within the past 5 years. I'm looking at my data. They're old. This one has a really bad cover, like it's falling apart. So I'm going to go ahead and weed like 10 of these. And weeding is something that libraries do as a regular policy. You cannot continue buying books and not get rid of books. Libraries are always having books come in and books go out. That's just how we work because we don't get bigger buildings every single year. So she applied her weeding to that list and got it down to 20. And then she said, this is our policy. We are going to buy multiple copies. We have this panel of 6 people that have to review it. It's going to stay on the shelf while the review happens. If we do this, we cannot have summer reading this year because the money that it will cost for us to do this will cut into all of our programming. Would you like to pick 5? And so that's what they got, this list of 100 down to 5. And then they went ahead and did the process on those 5 and all of them stayed. And as a matter of fact, one of the books that was read by one of the board members, after the board member read it, he was like, this should be required reading for everyone in the school, So it just brought a great spotlight onto wonderful literature, really.
I think people use the term weaponized incompetency, but that was weaponized competency. Mm-hmm. They use the bureaucracy to their advantage there.
Well, and that's what, if libraries ask me, like, what do we do? Follow your policy. Make sure you have a good policy to start, and that's really what libraries need to do with book banning is just make sure that you have a good policy backing you up so that you do have all of those best practices in line so that you can fight them at their own game, I guess.
So then the Naval Academy, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to go ahead and say the thing. So the Naval Academy went ahead and pulled just a crap ton of books.
Yeah.
A lot of civil rights books, a lot of civil rights leaders, a lot of LGBTQ stuff. And they just straight up pulled it, presumably without doing that process. Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
I don't know a whole lot about it other than the fact that as a different kind, a government library. I don't know that they would have a policy in place like that. I don't know that they would be able to fight something like that. But you bring up a good point in the types of things that are getting banned. It is Black literature. It is LGBTQ things about immigration. All of that's really getting targeted. Sorry, I don't really know what to say about the naval stuff because they really didn't have, I guess what I would say is they didn't have a tool that they could use to fight it.
Right. Because it sounds like the process you're talking about is, an outside force says these need to be removed where this was from the inside.
Right, exactly.
It is the powers that be saying pull it, and they just get pulled.
Yes,
and then some of them have been put back. But it's interesting too, because I actually read that. I looked at that list. I actually read that list, and I've read a couple of those books to my son, and I've had no problem reading those to my son.
Absolutely. And that's the irony, right? Because many authors are like, please ban my book, because then it's going to go on these lists, and then people are going to know the title, and they're going to be like, oh, I need to go read this because people are telling me not to read it, So it definitely has the opposite effect of what, quote unquote, they want to have happen,
Which reminds me, that's happened. That's happened in cases where there's a good podcast, this fun podcast people should check out. It's called Bandcamp, BANNED camp. And they take every season, they take a famous book that has been banned. They read it on the podcast and they comment on it. And, the one they just did was Brave New World, which caused me to read Brave New World, which I'd never actually read before.
Really?
Good read.
And it's, I know. I don't, it's crazy. It is a good read, but they did 1984 recently. And but to your point, once it gets banned, it's like, I got to read this thing now. Nice.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of overlap between a lot of the things that you've kind of culturally been dealing with the book banning stuff, and a lot of the stuff that the medical community has been going with, particularly since COVID and with this current administration, where there's a lot of disinformation and weird pressures that we've never felt. And it's been, for lack of a better word, demoralizing.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering how, and we always end our episodes with asking people how have your career choices kind of affected you personally and in your psyche and all these things? And yours are interesting because there's not been some big traumatic moment of children burning in a car or some sort of death, seeing tens of thousands of dead bodies
nothing like that.
But can you just talk to how this current climate has affected you and or your peers? But
yeah. So I will say that a library very close to me had to lay off half of their staff earlier this year. And that was extremely painful and quite traumatic. And it came, everyone at that library knew that the budget didn't look good, but still there hadn't been a lot of warning. And so people just came in on a Tuesday and got fired. And a lot of good friends of mine, people that I knew, were affected by this. And that was very demoralizing to have people that had worked for a library for decades just be sent off without any by your leave, just so long you're done, our budget can't hold you any longer. And that was really, really hard for the people that I knew who went through that to go through that. That was really difficult. And there is a lot of burnout in my field. There's a lot of burnout in the library field because people are underpaid. And they're really called to this work to help people. That's what librarians do. They're trying to help people really live the best life that they can live. And they're trying to maximize resources. I love the word stewardship. That's what a librarian does, is they have a collection of resources and they have to steward them through all the political ups and downs so that at the end of the day or the end of the year, or the end of the funding cycle, they still have a wonderful community resource to give to the next people that are coming up. If you think about the history of libraries going back into antiquity, that's what libraries do, is they're trying to hold community treasures and knowledge for the next generations. So that's why people go into libraries, is to help people. And to be in this climate right now where we're not getting paid well, people are getting fired, people are losing their jobs because they won't take a book off the shelf. There's some really scary legislation that people have tried to pass that really try to paint librarians and teachers too, but librarians in this, light of we're pedophiles, we're groomers, things like that. It's just really hurtful in a field where you're just trying to help people and protect resources for the next generation. That can be really, really difficult. For me personally, I have like, I don't know, 70% of my friends are librarians. So we talk about this stuff all the time, and we help lift each other up and support each other. So that's been super helpful. Yeah. And I am, right as we're recording this, I am between jobs. I have my next job coming soon, and I'm excited for that. So I've been able to, like, I don't know, kind of navigate through things personally, but still some personal self-sacrifice, and definitely days where you're like, why am I doing this? It's difficult.
Well, keep fighting the good fight. And
Thanks.
I encourage everybody out there to visit your local library, because show that you support them. And if you see those attacks, be involved and be the counter voice to it.
Definitely. I feel like I wish I could have said more about the power of public libraries. I'll just share quickly that, like, I grew up as a library kid. I am the kind of kid that I had a big collection of books because I got books for prizes in my summer reading program. Did you guys do summer reading when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And like, I love rewarding reading with more reading. And that's what I always try to do as a public librarian. I still have a lot of books that I just can't bear to part with that were given to me by my public library when I was a kid. And I still have a great relationship with my childhood public librarian. And I've gotten to tell her, like, I'm a librarian because you inspired me so much to be one. And I just love a library. I just do. Whenever I travel, I go see the public library. And I really think it tells you something about the community.
It does.
If they have a great public library, it tells you something about the values in that community, for sure.
Agreed.
Anyway.
As a quick aside, and this joke is not half as funny as something as Ryan would say, but one of the big jokes around my office, all my staff are like huge readers, and they read all the current like fantasy and what I would call like fairy porn stuff.
Sure.
So there's been this meme floating around where it's like, no, I read my smut like a proper fucking lady. And
absolutely. Yeah.
That just hit. Like, that hit so hard at my office because everyone was like, all the women were just like, yeah, that's right.
And I mean, I just feel like your reading journey is your own fucking reading journey. It's not anybody else's, like whatever you have going on in your own brain, that's for you and your brain. And like, nobody else needs to be involved in what I want to read or what Eric wants to read or what Ryan wants to read or what Adrian wants to read. Like, it's just whatever you want to read yourself. You should be free to be able to do that, because what does that have to do with anybody else in the world?
Well said.
That was my soapbox.
On that note, Marian, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been awesome. You are eloquent and well-spoken.
Thank you.
This has been a great episode. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us, Marian. Marian the Librarian, great line from The Music Man, and this episode really delivered. I really wanted to like sing a line from The Music Man, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to restrain myself. But really educational.
I would have just cut it out anyway.
And it would have been cut out anyway. And we're all committed to our local libraries and the idea of libraries as part of the linchpin of our society. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Marian, for coming on. And Ryan couldn't be here with us tonight, but if he were here, he would say check out ryanconnorcomedy.com for his tour dates, information about his book, his special. He's going to be in Iowa early next year, Roanoke, Virginia, and Vienna, Virginia. So you can check out his stuff there. We're terrible at marketing ourselves, but please subscribe, rate, review the podcast. Apparently that really makes a big difference. Share it with your friends. And again, Marian, thank you so much. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me be anonymous.
Music for Baggage provided by Quincy Ledbetter. You can find his stuff at qledbetter.com. Graphics provided by Megan Weaver. You can find her at meganweaverart.com. Special thanks to our premium members for their support. You can become a premium member by clicking subscribe in your Apple Podcast app or by visiting thebaggagepodcast.com/support to sign up or to gift a membership to someone. A percentage of all proceeds go to charity. If you have any questions, comments, or a good story to share, please email us at thebaggagepodcast@gmail.com.
Hey listeners, quick question. Do you know what extraterrestrial radio signals and a mushroom from Texas have in common? Or what a number station is and why it's so haunting and creepy? If you're intrigued by those questions, Midnight Facts for Insomniacs has the answers.
Join us, Duncan and Shane, hosts, comedians, and best friends, on hilarious deep dives into obscure facts from science, history, and pop culture.
So whether you're nocturnal or just a fan of laughing and learning, we'll keep you entertained. Find Midnight Facts for Insomniacs wherever you're listening to this show.